The day Karen decided my beehives were a personal insult, the air itself felt like it was holding its breath, waiting to see who would blink first. I remember the sound before anything else, the sharp crack of her clipboard slapping against her palm, echoing down the quiet cul-de-sac like a challenge bell. That was the moment I knew this wouldn't be another petty HOA complaint. This was war, and nature had already chosen sides. My hives sat at the edge of my backyard, neat white boxes humming with life, purpose, and patience. The bees were calm, organized, and productive, everything our neighborhood pretended to value. Karen, on the other hand, valued rules the way generals value borders. She marched up to my fence with rehearsed outrage, claiming my bees were aggressive, dangerous, and lowering property values. She said it loudly, making sure nearby neighbors peeked through blinds. I stayed quiet, because anyone who keeps bees learns early that panic spreads faster than stings. I tried explaining permits, inspections, and how pollinators actually helped everyone's gardens. Karen didn't listen. She never does. She pointed at a laminated HOA guideline like it was scripture, declaring that livestock wasn't allowed. I asked her if tomatoes counted as residents too, since bees had pollinated half the street. That joke did not land. Her lips thinned, eyes narrowed, and that's when she promised consequences. Over the next few days, notes appeared on my door. Warnings, fines, threats of legal action. Karen escalated like it was a hobby. Meanwhile, the bees kept working, oblivious to human drama. Golden pollen dusted their legs. Honey frames grew heavy. The hives thrummed with quiet resilience. I inspected them daily, calm on the outside, uneasy underneath. Something about Karen's tone suggested she wasn't done. Then came the knock. Not Karen this time, but an animal control officer, polite yet cautious, scanning my yard like he expected chaos. Karen stood across the street, arms folded, triumphant smile ready. She had made the call. She wanted authority, removal, punishment. What she didn't understand was that ecosystems don't respond well to bullying. As the officer stepped closer to the hives, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of honey deeper into the trees behind my house. That's when I noticed the broken branches, the disturbed earth, and the unmistakable feeling that we were no longer alone. The forest behind the fence was older than our bylaws, patient and watchful, stitched together by trails unseen. Bees knew those paths. Bears did too. I felt a prickle along my neck. The sense you get when balance tips. When human arguments stumble into wild mathematics with teeth. Hunger and consequences waiting silently. The next morning began with a stillness that felt unnatural, like the world had paused to listen. I stepped into my backyard before sunrise, coffee cooling in my hand, and noticed the fence line first. The wooden slats near the trees were scratched. Not deeply, but deliberately, as if something large had leaned in to sniff curiosity rather than attack. My bees were already awake, drifting out in soft spirals, unaware that Karen's crusade had crossed into older territory. By mid-morning, Karen was back. This time she brought reinforcements, another HOA board member and a phone held high, recording. She announced loudly that animal control had confirmed my hives were attracting wildlife. The irony nearly choked me. Bees attract flowers, I said calmly. Flowers attract life. That's how the planet works. Karen scoffed and zoomed in on the hives like she was documenting a crime scene. I tried again to reason. I showed her the bear-resistant straps, the elevated stands, the required distances from property lines. Facts bounced off her outrage like rain off plastic. She wanted the hives gone, immediately. She cited safety, children, pets, fear. Fear is a powerful tool when you don't understand what you're afraid of. Later that afternoon, the neighborhood group chat exploded. Someone posted photos of paw prints near the creek. Someone else blamed my bees. Karen chimed in within seconds, capital letters blazing, demanding emergency action. I didn't respond. I was too busy securing the apiary, reinforcing lids, and checking that the electric fence was functioning. Beekeeping teaches preparation, not panic. As dusk fell, the woods behind my house came alive. Branches cracked deeper this time. Leaves shifted with weight, not wind. I stood on my porch, heart pounding, watching shadows move between trunks. A bear stepped into the clearing, massive and calm, nose lifted, testing the air. It wasn't aggressive. It was curious, following instincts older than any HOA charter. The bear circled once, then twice, never touching the hives. It sniffed, huffed softly, and wandered off toward the creek. No damage, no chaos, just nature checking its boundaries. I exhaled, muscles trembling with relief and awe. The next morning, Karen was furious. She waved blurry photos at anyone who would listen, claiming disaster had narrowly been avoided because of her vigilance. What she didn't mention was that nothing had happened. The hives were intact. The bees were calm. The bear had passed through like a rumor, but nature had noticed the attention. And when nature notices pressure, it has a way of responding. Not with malice, but with balance. Karen was still pushing. She didn't realize she was standing on the edge of a lesson that couldn't be fined away. Karen doubled down the way people do when reality refuses to validate them. She filed formal complaints, demanded emergency HOA meetings, and circulated a petition that described my beehives as an imminent environmental threat. The language was dramatic, almost theatrical, like she was auditioning for a disaster documentary. I attended the meeting anyway, sitting calmly while neighbors whispered and Karen paced, feeding off the attention like it was oxygen. She spoke first, of course. She talked about fear, about safety, about how close we'd come to catastrophe. She waved her phone again, showing the same grainy bear photos, zooming until pixels replaced facts. When it was my turn, I didn't argue, I explained. I described how bears move through territories regardless of bees, how hives are secured, how panic creates more risk than pollinators ever could. Some people nodded, others avoided eye contact. Karen crossed her arms, already planning her next move. That move came faster than I expected. 2 nights later, I woke to alarms blaring from my backyard. I ran outside to find chaos, not from animals, but from interference. Someone had tampered with the electric fence, leaving it partially disconnected. Honey had spilled from a cracked frame, the sweet smell hanging heavy in the air like a beacon. I didn't need proof to know whose frustration had finally boiled over. The problem with meddling in ecosystems is that they don't care about intent, only results. The broken fence did exactly what it was never meant to do. It invited attention. Not just one bear this time, but a sow and her cubs, drawn by scent and opportunity. They didn't attack in anger. They fed, they explored. They did what nature does when a signal is sent clearly enough. By morning, the damage was undeniable. A few hives toppled. Honey smeared the grass. Paw prints crossed the yard and continued down the street, right past Karen's meticulously landscaped lawn. Her bird feeders were gone. Her trash bins were overturned. Deep claw marks scored the wooden post near her patio. The bears had followed the trail of sweetness and curiosity straight into her world. Karen emerged screaming, phone shaking. Neighbors gathering as she demanded answers. Animal control returned, this time serious, documenting real damage. They traced the source calmly, methodically, pointing out the broken fence, the interference, the chain of cause and effect. Karen's face drained, of color as her narrative collapsed. Under quiet professionalism, no one cheered. No one gloated. The lesson didn't need witnesses. Nature had spoken in a language older than rules, clearer than shouting. Karen had picked a fight with balance itself, and balance had responded without cruelty, only consequence. The aftermath settled over the neighborhood like dust after a storm, quiet but impossible to ignore. Karen stopped posting. The group chat went silent. Animal control installed temporary warning signs near the creek, calmly explaining bear corridors and attractants to anyone willing to listen. For the first time since this began, fear was replaced by understanding. Not because someone shouted louder, but because reality had finally stepped forward. The HOA held one final meeting. Karen arrived late, subdued, no clipboard, no speeches prepared. When the topic of my beehives came up, the tone was different. Questions replaced accusations. Solutions replaced threats. The board voted to formally recognize local beekeeping under clear guidelines, citing environmental benefit and recent events. The motion passed without drama. Karen didn't object. She stared at the table, fingers tight, learning the hardest lesson of all. Control has limits. Back home, I rebuilt what was damaged. New frames, reinforced stands, fresh wiring on the fence. The bees adapted instantly, returning to work with the quiet confidence that only collective purpose creates. Watching them reminded me why I started in the first place. They don't waste energy on grudges. They respond to conditions, adjust, and move forward. A week later, Karen knocked on my door. No camera, no audience. She didn't apologize outright, but she didn't accuse either. She asked questions. About the bees, about how honey forms, about why bears follow certain paths. I answered not because she deserved it, but because education prevents repetition. When she left, she glanced back at the hives. Not with anger, but caution mixed with respect. The bears never returned. The woods reclaimed their silence. Gardens bloomed heavier that season, tomatoes larger, flowers brighter. Neighbors noticed. Conversations changed. People waved more. The conflict that once divided the street became a shared story, retold carefully with humility. What Karen learned wasn't about bees or bears. It was about boundaries you can't legislate away. Nature doesn't argue. It doesn't retaliate. It simply responds perfectly to the signals it's given. Push without understanding, and you invite correction. Work with balance, and life hums along, productive and calm. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with sirens or shouting. Sometimes it arrives on padded feet, guided by instinct, reminding us that we are guests here, not managers. Karen picked a fight with my beehives, convinced authority would carry her through. In the end, it wasn't me who won. It was nature, quietly, inevitably, finishing what she started. If you enjoyed this Karen versus nature story, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. Was Karen right or did nature win?